Now, another group of Confederate flag-waving protesters gathered near Durant High School in Oklahoma yesterday when President Obama was scheduled to make a speech. Now, these protesters were there to insist. They weren't actually protesting Barack Obama, they say, but they were just saying that, hey, Barack Obama, black guy, our flag, we're going to meet you with this flag to show how we're not racist. Oh, interesting. So, according to one of the protesters, a man by the name of Trey Johnson, he says, this is about heritage, and we're not going to stand down from our heritage. You know, this flag's not racist, and I know a lot of people think it is, but it's really not. This is a Southern thing. That's it. Oh, it's just a Southern thing. All right, well, let me give you a direct quote from the man who designed this flag. The battle flag, by the way. Who designed it? It was a man named William Thompson. Now, his quote says, "As a people, we are fighting to maintain the heaven-ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race." Now, wait a minute. It's just a Southern thing. Now, when you hear that quote, do you agree that it's just a Southern thing? It's not racist at all? From the man who designed the flag, who also designed the second flag of the Confederacy, where they actually first started using the stars and bars to differentiate it from the, of course, Yankee flag. Another protester who gave her name as Stephanie. Now, Stephanie thinks that this is about history. It's not about racism at all. Because, and get this, she says it's not about racism at all because both black and white people, well, they stood side by side and fought together in the Confederacy for the beliefs that they believed in. Black and white, side by side, fighting for freedom and Confederacy. That's what Stephanie believes. No, they did not. They were not standing side by side fighting for freedom. They were on the opposite sides. You know, and the side that you're defending, that side is the side that believed in owning black people. So if one was going to stand side by side in the Confederacy with a black person, normally that black person would be in chains. Is that what you believe in? Is that what you believe would happen? Now, from what you're saying, it doesn't sound like you think... It doesn't sound like you want to be racist. It sounds like you're deeply misinformed about what the Confederacy was actually fighting for. And in any historical document that hasn't been changed, of course, by Texas, that isn't in a Texas textbook, shows that the number one reason that the Confederacy, the number one thing that the Confederacy was fighting for was their ability to keep slaves. Oh, states' rights. Yeah, the state's right to keep and own human beings. And look, the irony here is that also they're doing this in Oklahoma. Now, to be fair, one of the protesters that I mentioned earlier actually drove up from Texas, who was part of the Confederacy. But Oklahoma itself wasn't even a state at that point. It was actually a territory. And it was in what was called the Indian Territories. Now, here's where your history lesson comes in. Now, interestingly enough, this territory, it was called the Indian Territory, and that was because there was a lot of Native American tribes there. There were actually the five civilized tribes that basically inhabited this area. Now, during the Civil War, the Confederacy was actually able to successfully recruit some of these Native Americans to fight on their behalf. Interesting. Now, this comes from a little bit of history here, and it says, leaders from each 5 civilized tribes, acting without the consensus of their councils, agreed to be annexed by the Confederacy in exchange for certain rights. including protection and recognition of current tribal lands. So here's the Confederacy saying, boy, we need a little help against the Union. Why don't we go to the Indian territories and ask them for some help? And then we'll promise them some land, or that we would leave their land alone if we win. Yeah, you can go ahead and keep the Indian territory. No, that's fine. Just fight on our side. Interesting. Now, the 5 civilized tribes were the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole nations. And from them, a total of 7,860 Native Americans actually participated in fighting on behalf of the Confederate Army, as both officers and enlisted men. Now, it wasn't just the Confederacy that used Native Americans as well. There was the Union. And the Native Americans that fought for the Union, they were in a group called the Indian Home Guard, and they served in the Indian Territory and sometimes also served in Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas during the war. And there were actually many huge battles that went on in the Indian Territories during the Confederate War, or during the Civil War. That's very interesting. But in none of these were there really any black people standing side by side with white people fighting for the Confederacy. So basically, you're wrong. Whoever the Stephanie person is, they have a really interesting / horribly wrong, deeply flawed view of history. As does Trey Johnson. This flag isn't a Southern thing. There are plenty of other Southern things. There are plenty of other Southern things to be proud of. Rock and roll, man. Memphis, Tennessee. Birthplace of modern rock and roll. You're telling me that's something not to be proud of? I'd be incredibly proud of that. There are so many different things in the South to be proud of. This is something to be ashamed of. This is like the Nazi flag. You think Germans are proud? Holding up this flag as heritage? Then why are you doing it? Why do you want this to be your heritage? Well, the only reason that most of these people think that that's their heritage is because that's what they were taught to believe. A lot of their textbooks have left out the horrible things about the Civil War and have misled a lot of people. In fact, there are still pushes in Texas in order to downplay the importance of slavery during the Civil War. And there have been efforts. There have been textbooks from 1971 that called slavery the first form of social welfare in America. Isn't that ridiculous? No wonder you have conservatives there calling it welfare and government programs the government plantation. No wonder. It all kind of makes sense when you put it together, right? Because that's what they're taught. They are lied to. They're brainwashed by all of this pro-Confederacy, pro-racist propaganda being taught, being institutionalized. The South may have lost the war, but they're still continuing to fight the battles to rewrite history. That's dangerous. And as I said, this flag is a racist thing because, look, not only did it start out as a racist thing, a symbol that white people were obviously superior than colored people, the inferior black people. But it was also brought back to protest racial integration in the 1960s. And who brought it back was the KKK and Southern Dixiecrats, who are now part of the core base of the Republican Party. Those are the people who brought it back. As for some of these protesters, I don't think they're all racist. Not everybody who flies this flag is a racist. Okay? You have to understand that. You have to understand that a lot of these people are victims of misinformation. Right? Because they haven't learned their history. And a lot of people, once they actually do learn this history, they look at it and they're like, holy shit, man. Like you had the last surviving member of Leonard Skinner. Leonard Skinner, who used to use this flag as a backdrop in almost all of their concerts, comes out and says, "Oh boy, yeah, you know what? Now that I know the history of this, suddenly not cool. I'm sorry for doing it." Tom Petty comes out and says, "This was a mistake. Using this at my concerts. Definite mistake. If I had known what this really stood for, then I wouldn't have used this." When people look up the actual history and learn the true history of this flag, of this battle flag, and what it stands for and what has been reappropriated as during the civil rights era, they abandon it. And of course, there are still those who, even though they know the history, won't abandon it. And of course, we have a word for those people.